Hey there, welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Janelle.
And I'm Karen.
Each week, one of us brings a topic to the table, something we've been wrestling about, or reading about, or noticing in our own lives.
And the other acts in real time. No scripts, no prep, just an honest conversation between a mother and daughter spanning generations about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by bias, power, and inherited patterns.
We don't always agree, and it's not always comfortable, but we show up anyways. Let's wake up.
Hey, Janelle, how are you?
Hey, Aaron, good. How are you?
Okay, couple plugs. Second week in July, so that's good. It's after 4th of July.
Yes.
We have our band book club, 5:15 Pacific time. Email hello@whitewomenwakeup, and you will get a link for that Zoom. And we're doing Persepolis, which is a pretty fast read because it is a graphic novel.
Yeah. And then another announcement that I've totally forgot to do last week, but we have a survey up on our website.
Right.
A community survey. It's on our website. It's in our show notes. But we would love, love, love your feedback on things, on other community events you would like us to start. The Band Book Club has been so fun and successful that we would just love to expand to more. So, yeah.
Maybe it's a conversation group.
Yes.
We just really feel like we have benefited, or I should say I have benefited so much from being able to just have these discussions with you, Janelle, and then, of course, with our listeners and outside people. I just feel like I've grown so much in my awareness about how I show up in the world with my own inherited patterns.
Yeah, I love it too. Same thing too. If you want us to come speak to a group you're involved in,
it'd be fun.
to anything, we would love, love to come do that and be a part of your community as well. So please do the survey. It's flashing on our website right when you get on at whitewomenwakeup.com. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just reflecting again, we've spoken a lot about culture over the last couple weeks, and I just keep thinking about it. And, it's so interesting how culture can be this odd illusion, right? And I was thinking, imagine living your life in Disneyland, where you just think it's always, beautiful and clean. And it's just, anyways, life is really truthfully messy. And I think we need to embrace all the sides of what we are and try to do less harm to the world.
I completely agree. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you said, we've spent 2 weeks on culture. I still think we landed in a pretty good place. I still think there's some maybe not alignment there, but yeah, I hope it helped. Again,
Well, I think we both aligned that we agree that there can be this confusion between what's heritage and what's culture, and paying attention to those spaces.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say. I think if I can't emphasize this enough, words matter, and really understanding your words and not being sloppy with your words, I think is really important, especially on an anti-racist inclusive journey. Is words mean so much more to a lot of people than I think a lot of white people realize. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and especially if we're the dominant culture, right?
Yeah, 100%.
We don't have to worry. We don't always think about our words, right?
It's easy to glide by words. Well, speaking of words, wait, this is a really interesting. I love Amy Poehler's podcast, and I listen to it all the time. So bright and happy and fun. And she had Tom Holland on recently, who I also just adore. He is just such a great, you can tell he really respects women and the way he uplifts women. Anyways, so that's a total side note. But she was talking about the slight differences between like British English and American English. And she said she learned recently, which I didn't know either, that quite means very different in British English than in the US. In the US, when we say that was quite good, we usually mean, oh my gosh, that was really good, or this is really great. In Britain, they mean it was just okay. And so she was saying it was like she had spent years thinking she had done really well on a lot of projects when
Oh,
British coworkers were like, That was quite well,"
that was
kind of
quite
thing.
good.
And so, again, it's just a funny thing about, like, how words really matter.
They do matter.
Understanding your
Yeah,
word
yeah.
in the right space really means and shifts the conversation. So,
Yeah, that's a
I
really
thought
good
that was
example.
a fun
Yeah,
one.
I remember when you were little, we went to England, and pants means something different
Oh,
in Britain. Don't pa Aren't pants like underpants or something?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
were
don't know.
very and trousers are what we would call pants,
Yeah.
and so you thought that was really funny. You laughed about that a lot. Okay, it's interesting, Janelle, I did appreciate a couple episodes ago where she's like, "Haven't we already talked about this? This was in a previous episode." And listeners, you gotta give me grace. We're on, like, episode 75, right? And so, um, we're gonna repeat. And so I know that we've had this conversation before, but
Can I
I
clarify
definitely
something though?
what?
We're gonna repeat with new intention to the
Yes,
conversation.
yes, yes,
I
yes.
don't want people to feel like we're just going to just
Or
keep
Or to pull
replaying.
the awareness back up again,
Yes,
because
yes.
that's probably more what I'm saying here. Because I don't wanna think that we are so ignorant we are not aware of this, but it's just a reminder that it exists and is it actually getting worse
Agreed. It's like
is
when I
mostly
talked about
yeah,
DEI a couple weeks ago. We had
yeah,
done a DEI episode on the DEI rollbacks, and then I kinda wanted to bring it back up to light as in, like, a year later, things like that. But, yes, I
yeah,
wanna just clarify
yeah,
for listeners,
yeah,
we're not just gonna start repeating ourselves because we're
there's
lazy
nothing
and have
else
no
to
other
say.
topics. We've run out of things to say.
Yeah.
Not true.
No. So I was reading, a LinkedIn article. I feel bad, I forgot who the article was written by, and the article was all about, it was a South Asian woman who had moved from India so that she could get out of the caste system,
Mm.
moved to Britain and felt that she still felt the caste system, moved to the United States to get out of the caste system, and said when in fact that caste system is still exists in corporate America.
Yeah.
And, I thought that's so interesting because we don't call it that. And I think, okay, so this is where I think learning about different cultures, learning about how other places organize, um, systems, organize government,
Yeah.
organize social structure is actually important because I think as white Americans, for example, I can think I'm so much better than that, or, like, I know personally I'm uncomfortable with the language of caste system.
Mhm.
Now, what I do understand in India, caste system often is something you're born into. Now, we do know that, you
Racism.
have a greater demographic if, like I was a white male living in a wealthy family, there's greater demographics that I would succeed. But in America, we kind of like to think that, we can pull ourselves up from the bootstraps and everyone has the opportunity to
Yeah.
break the kind of those social barriers. But I wanna entertain when I say corporate America as a caste system,
Oof,
I wanna
interesting.
entertain that language. What
Uh,
does that conjure up for you? And do you see that? Or were you and I both the
oof.
benefit of not experiencing the caste system?
I wish I would love to see and read this article because I would love to understand more about how she identified it as a caste system. Because, like I said,
Yeah.
my
Well,
understanding of caste
I'll lay that out in a second, but I want your
can
just
you lay that out?
your
Can you lay that out first? I need
well, a
some
part of me
understanding
would
of
like your just fresh perspective on it.
No,
Like,
I don't
as
have
a
a
corporate
perspective.
executive no, I think your perspective is really interesting because you've held high-end corporate executive roles, right? And so if I were to come to you in a meeting and say, "I feel like our corporate structure is like a caste system," how would you own that?
No, but I would own that by asking for more research on the
Okay.
context
Okay.
of what is
So
meant as a caste system. But if you
okay.
really want my initial
Yeah, I do.
without any without any context, I I would say my understanding as a caste system is basically you are born into a system and that is your station in life and you can't move anywhere else in
Within the
life
confines.
within the
It's
context.
almost like in the corporate world, you're a level 6 or you had like 20 levels,
Yeah.
and if you're in the level 18 gets these privileges versus level 12.
Yes.
Remember that? Yeah,
No, I
yeah.
you asked me to go into my experience, and I
Oh,
was just gonna
sorry,
talk about that.
sorry.
And, oh, this has been a pattern for several weeks now of, like, not letting me finish my thought. I mean, I know I interrupt you too, but anyways, so, yes, initially, when I heard that, I thought to myself, "That's not necessarily true," but then I did start thinking about it. It's really dependent. I actually do think it is a caste system. Like, she makes a really good point, and it is and this is why I think company hopping has become such a big thing is because oftentimes the role level that you are brought into, and I saw it a lot in corporate America, is the role level that you are stuck at. And I even found throughout my career that, like, I did have to hop a couple times to move up those levels and then even go back to the same company that I was at previously to then get a higher level. And now there was a couple times I was able to move up internally, but I mean, now that I'm really breaking that down, I do kinda see exactly what she means, especially at certain levels. Like, if you are in an entry level that doesn't have a growth path, but you are in an entry level that has a cap, so you look at, like, executive assistants or, these, like, analysts, kinda these, like, entry level roles that doesn't have a clear career path, those a lot of people definitely just stay at, and there is no movement there because, again, corporations haven't built a clear roadmap. Now, you can even say, like, this is a big thing that we used to work on with our teams are, like, what because every person always asks about this, like, what is the next career development? What is the next space? And I worked in a buying structure most of my career in merchandising, and so there's usually a clear roadmap on, assistant assistant buyer, and then you move into, like, associate buyer and so forth. But even there, it's hard. We promise a lot of entry level people start at this role and then we say there's a career path and there isn't, or even and this will be my last point before you go,
Oh,
and
no, this is perfect.
even I used to talk to my students about I won't use corporate nation names, but they're a big tech company in Seattle that has pretty fast shipping and has kind of ruined
Well, I'm
the
gonna use some
world.
corporate tech names, so
Okay, Amazon.
yeah.
Anyways, so Amazon I did warn my students. I was a adjunct professor for a while in fashion, and I would warn my students about they were really excited about these like quote unquote entry level roles at Amazon. And when I kind of looked at the description and saw what they were, basically Amazon was making a modern day like corporate factory out of things, and you could tell that there was gonna be no forward movement or connection from that role, and so I would really advise them, I know that sounds exciting, but it's not gonna be something that's going to give you a career path in Amazon. It's
Yeah.
something that's gonna keep you basically at that low entry level role, for pretty much forever. So, interesting. This is
So it's
I'm so excited. Talk more
so
about this.
thank
This is,
you.
like,
Thank
right up
you
my
that
alley
you
of interesting topics.
well, and exactly, like, one of the things that I think that this podcast is trying to do for you and I, or at least for myself, is I'm looking at different ways, different cultures, different think around framework, right? Like one
Yeah.
of the things that I've really appreciated is in the indigenous culture, they use matriarchal values as a way to structure their government.
Yeah.
And so that's been really exciting to just pay attention. So when
Love a good
this writer said
matriarchal.
caste system, I thought, huh. But the more that we play it out, like you just walked into the definition in such a beautiful way. Like
Yeah.
you don't, like you said exactly how I felt. You don't think of it that way initially because, like you, like me, we were raised to think a little differently, like how we're gonna move up the corporate ladder. We were told it was a ladder, not
Yeah.
a caste system,
Well
not a fixed system that we would be stuck at. So we bought into this we bought into the patriarchal values
well, I
of how we're gonna move up the corporate ladder.
I think there's 2 things off of that. I think one is this goes back to, like, always believe the stories of the people who've
Yeah,
experienced it. Like, clearly, we didn't see it as a caste system because we have not lived in a culture of a true caste system, so
yeah,
we didn't understand what that looks like. It's kind of like when someone who has dealt with, like, abusive relationships calls out a toxic boss,
yeah,
but not everyone sees the toxicity. No, trust that this person who has been embedded in toxic relationships can see the toxicity. And so anyways, it makes
yeah.
total sense why this woman who grew up in a
Who's
caste
from a
system
caste system,
would be
tried to get away
easily
from it.
yes, to easily identify everyone. Does no one see this? Like,
Yeah,
what's happening around here? And so I think that's a really interesting point. I think the second thing is like the career ladder thing. I I think one that is such like you're saying, I it's such a patriarchy, white privilege kind of dream that it was sold to
yeah.
people
It's
because it
still
is
being sold to
true.
people.
Well,
Yeah,
because it is true for still a lot of white men,
yeah,
but not fully. But this
and
was
not
the case.
fully,
Not
and
fully,
not
because
fully.
a lot of white men now still, like everyone else, have to jump around to move up the ladder.
Yeah,
And I think the hard part is though, they were sold this story harder than anyone else. And so I think this is why they're also
really
so
angry.
confused and
Yeah,
angry because like at least the rest of us understood we had to do these workarounds to get where we wanted to go. White men were always sold the story of you just move up the ladder kind
yeah,
of thing. I remember one time asking a family friend of ours who was a white male. He was an executive at in marketing at a big tech company and stuff, and I asked him about, like, marketing advice for something, and he gave me the blandest, most white and even then, I was, like, in college, so I didn't pinpoint it as white privilege advice, but it was literally the you could clearly tell by someone who never really had to worry a day in his life of how he would move up his
yeah,
career because it, like, wasn't a thoughtful and so anyways, that that, so I do think that story was sold because it was sold by then, and then when women really entered the corporate workforce around your 70s, 80s, you know, you had the big boom of that. I think that's when, again, white women were still seeing like, okay, we know we had to work harder, but they were still seeing the benefits of that corporate
yeah,
ladder.
yeah,
And
there was still a sense, or at least we believed a sense, of being able to crawl up that ladder.
yeah,
It's interesting, after doing the research, though, the people who have experienced this the greatest are adjunct professors, and I laughed because I was an adjunct professor
yeah,
for, like, 7 years. So let me
yeah,
explain
yeah.
a little bit
Go into it.
of what she's saying, and I think the reason I think this is really relevant is I think right now in our system, we're just walking through, like, Scott Pelley being fired from 60 Minutes. I
Mhm.
think in our system, we are seeing a level of wealth control the
Oh,
capital of the workforce.
yeah,
And so this would be that rich upper caste. And
yeah.
that rich upper caste is redefining the roles of the worker based on the way they wanna define it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so maybe yeah,
Well,
it's very different. So
but I
here's
think
the
wait, really quickly, I agree with you, and I think that I think that has been continued to be amplified after every big, like, tech bubble, like, if you
yeah.
look at the internet bubble and stuff of the '90s and 2000s, it's because all of a sudden you could get the quote unquote "everyday man" into these jobs that were needed, that were high power, that were making money, and they needed them. It wasn't the leaders just making money, and I think now after several decades of that, these capitalists, that upper chunk needs to build back in their, like, control over the
Yeah,
capitalist
their
society.
personal control.
Their
Yeah,
personal control, because for a while it was this,
yeah,
wild, wild west
yeah.
of needing these roles and needing and this speed, and we're even seeing it a little bit with, like, I think they had hope of AI than even being able to take over
Oh,
jobs
it's
to
gonna get
control
worse.
people,
Yeah,
but, like,
yeah,
then they're finding actually that's not necessarily the case. You're still needing smart, intelligent people, and so it's not the same control force
yeah.
that I think, I mean, now I sound like I'm spitting
Okay.
conspiracy theories, but
Okay, I wanna, give you some stats here.
okay.
So, basically, and we've spoken about the DEI rollbacks, and we've spoken so the challenge okay, so what I wanna say about the caste system is what we know and what we understand in and anyone who's listening to this that has worked for a large corporation understands that benefits,
Mhm.
vacations, corporate benefits are different for different categories
Mm.
of the workforce.
Yeah.
Okay. We all, I don't think I need to be more explicit about that.
No.
Some people might get 2 weeks vacation, other people's might get 8 weeks vacation.
Yeah.
Some people might get full benefits, some people might get partial benefits or no benefits at all. The big concern is what they're calling is the tech shadow workforce. Contractors are, the contract term. So Google has a term, they're called TVCs, and the term means, oh god, oh gosh, I wrote it down and I already what is a TVC? I forgot it already. It's like
Well, look,
technical vendor contract worker,
okay.
okay? And these contract workers now at Google outnumber full-time employees. So over 50% are TVCs at Google,
Yeah,
okay?
believe that.
Over 50% do not receive any benefits, stock,
Yeah.
they are excluded, this is crazy, from the sexual harassment policies. So what we're seeing now is a class system
Mhm.
of the haves and the have-not. And I remember, like, it was really I was much more aware of this when I was an adjunct,
Yeah.
professor because paid by the time you break down your hours, it's less than minimum wage, right? And so I remember thinking a lot like, oh, I know at Microsoft, for example, if you were a contractor, you had a different color badge than you do if you're an employee.
Yeah.
The challenge now, that might have been a small minority in a company. It now is becoming the majority.
But whether it's a small minority or not, I remember I was a contractor for my first job out of school, and it was, you're so excited for a job, camaraderie, this, and you, as a contractor, you really do feel like, I didn't get to go to the corporate parties. I didn't get to go, like you said,
No,
a different
you're
badge.
excluded.
You're really excluded, and
It's the caste system.
it's such an odd experience because you're like, we're literally sitting next to each other doing the same
Yep,
job, and then
yep.
yet I but, yeah, but corporations do it to
So
benefit them.
so your perfect example of the DEI rollbacks in 2025, we went from sponsoring the United States large corporation for Fortune 500 companies sponsored about 48% of programs were for women, were for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. It is now dropped down to 16%
Wow.
at the Fortune 500 just in 1 year. And unfortunately, Black and Latino workers make up only 7% of the full-time tech employees.
Ugh.
So, but account for 26% of white collar contractors and 56% of blue collar contractors. And 51% of these contractor workers receive no benefits. I
Yeah.
mean, and then there's one more thing. There's over 70 million Americans now are in freelance, contract, or the gig economy. 70 million
Yeah.
Americans. There's only 330 million
I
Americans
know.
that exist. So we're talking about what? Approximately, let me do my math, a third, is that a third? Maybe a quarter of our population
Yeah.
is not receiving, well, that's a third when you think about adult people. So we now see that this caste system
Well, wait,
clearly
really quickly
again,
before you go, oh, sorry.
yeah.
But,
No,
like,
it's
not receiving benefits that you're saying is this is again like these social programs, like we are paying more in taxes for social programs for this because to make up for corporations.
so
It's the
that
same it's the same thing about like minimum wage. Like we are not asking these corporations to pay or like you think of wait staff. We now the consumers are paying the tips because we're not requiring restaurants to actually pay a living wage to their staff. We are not, and so it continually goes again to the tax dollars. And now here's the deal. I don't have a problem paying into social programs, but and so I'm not arguing against that, but I want to see the people who do complain about going into paying for social programs is the reality is then they need to be yelling at their government to tax these
yeah,
corporations, to
yeah.
tax these big companies, to force
But
these big
but
companies.
we know in Seattle, for example, we had the millionaire tax. We had some of our friends, our white friends, uncomfortable with that because they thought it would mean they would be taxed too. So
100%,
we
but then
are
this is
so
why it's
complicit to this
but this is
hierarchy.
well, I mean, more to, like, the federal level of, like, getting, just making these corporations accountable. I mean, it goes time and time again. We even talk about things like AI or environmental stuff, and it is not the individual that is ruining the environment, it is these corporations. I have a friend who does environmental consulting and for for years, she still does, obviously, recycling all the individual things, but, like, she used to really talk about the individual, and she has changed and realized, no, it is the corporations causing
Yeah,
all of this.
and it's only
All of
getting
our
worse.
individual all of our individual taxes, all of our individual work, all of that combined still is only a small dent into what the corporate impact is.
Okay, can I keep
Sorry.
talking about the
Yeah.
caste system? Okay, so, Isabel, let me get this back. So, Isabel Wilkerson, in her book, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, writes about this, and I
Yeah.
definitely that's gotta be a summer read for me. She says that it's not a hatred, it is the worn grooves of unthinking expectation, a social order so old it looks like the natural order of things.
Yeah.
That is exactly what tiered benefits are. And I was thinking about this, I feel like I've learned so much in our podcast. So, for example, one thing I've learned is that as a white woman, I often am doing the hard emotional labor for a white man. and I'll be the first one to stick I've thought I've worked up the corporate ladder,
Yeah.
and then I've been put in a position with power, and then I'm asked by the white man or the patriarchy to control that power.
Yeah.
Well, I've never seen it played out in such a big way as the Scott Pelley laying off. Bari Weiss is playing to the patriarchal white man. Bari Weiss is a scary white woman in that she, is interesting, but one of the things that I think she attempted early on was to have an independent voice and to be able to be recognized.
Mhm.
She is now so bought out by the wealth of the Ellison family that, she now is tearing apart some of our social structure and falling right into those patriarchal values.
Yeah.
And we know the minute she makes a mistake, the Ellisons will not be fired. Bari Weiss will be fired
Yeah.
because
Oh,
that is
yeah.
what this patriarchal system does. And
Yes.
so anyways, I just think that by knowing and claiming what it is that we are in, the tech equity, there are places we can right now, our senators have it's called HELP, and it's for health, education, labor, and pension. They are working on benefits to help people to
Great.
one thing I'm a new firm believer, I don't think our Civil Rights Act should be called civil rights. I think it needs to be called, um, uh, protective rights, because I think we used to be civil people, we're not civil
No.
anymore. I think we've lost the understanding of what it means to be civil, and what it really is about protective rights.
Well, you know what
Our
I think
caste system needs protective
you know what
rights.
I think it should be?
But
Called Rights for All.
rights
Because
for all.
Because here's the thing, they've done studies time and time again, when social programs and I talked about this, like, I think just a couple episodes ago, but when social programs are marketed as benefiting everyone, so think kind of unemployment, think retirement, think like
Yeah,
all Medicare, like those ones that everyone feels like they can tap into, people are less likely to cut them. The people are less likely to fight to cut them. And so therefore, when we create programs that everyone can tap into, we get more people excited about paying taxes into that program. And
yeah,
so and genuinely, and that's what you want are programs
yep.
that everyone can tap into.
So the one thing that we're seeing, but
It
I also
benefits
wanna
everyone.
end it like, what can we do? So the one thing that
Yeah,
we're seeing is the same companies, these Fortune 500 companies that have cut the DEI programs, which of course are, programs that give voice to the marginalized,
yep,
are the same companies that are expanding their contractor workforce. This contractor workforce is disproportionately BIPOC.
yeah,
And so, you can see if we don't give knowledge to people, the DEI knowledge and awareness, then they don't understand what they're doing, and we can control them that way.
yeah.
Um, this is evidence. So, what can we do? If you have a full-time job at a company that uses contractors, you have standing. Ask who is classified as what. Ask if they have health care. Do some fighting. Do some sources. In 2019, now I don't know if those people still exist, but Google employees did sign a petition demanding
Mhm.
equal treatment for the contractors. That was 6 years ago, and it's only gotten worse, but there are ways to do this. One of the biggest things, as we know, is sitting back and being complicit is the biggest problem,
Well
not looking and not arguing.
and this is kind of what I was talking about with social programs too. So many people are individually focused on themselves and, like, getting benefits and things for themselves, but again, that is the white feminist, the white individualism. If you actually fight for benefits for all,
Yep,
then, like, if you fight for benefits for contractors, your benefits are likely to be better overall as
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
so it's a system of bring everyone up instead of just focusing on your own personal
Gain.
station in
Yeah,
life.
we gotta get out
Right.
of the individual mindset. So
Yeah,
anyways, I just thought that was interesting,
great
me
topic.
thinking about it, the caste system, which we are
Great
in. We
topic.
are in.
Can I have
Okay.
a confession quickly
Yeah.
before we end it?
Yeah.
I thought Karen was gonna do another topic because she kind of
Oh, I did.
slightly
I switched.
hinted at it, and I did not agree with her, so I actually did my research. I did research for this episode for that topic,
Well,
which
I
I know
switched
is
on you,
against
didn't I?
which is I know against our rules, but I wanted to have a clear perspective, and you totally switched on me, but honestly, I'm happy you did. I love this
Yeah. Well,
topic, and I
I
did
love
felt like I cheated a little bit,
what
so
you do. You get inspired by what's out in the media, and when I read that article, I'm like, "Oh my
love
gosh."
it.
And as white women, I mean, it was the combination between learning more about Bari Weiss, learning about, all of these things going on, Cecilia Vega being laid off, ridiculous, a
Ugh,
competent, strong woman,
yeah.
and then this article about the caste system and how we are changing our corporate structure by
Yes.
these very wealthy mega millionaires
Ugh,
that that are changing the landscape of America.
yeah,
So, and
they are.
how we live in this space. We're never gonna
Yes.
get advertising.
That's not true. I think we'll find people who though, well, we'll
I
see.
don't know. It
Anyways,
doesn't.
that
What
we
matters
gotta
is
find
we wanna bring
okay, wait,
awareness. We
that's
wanna
another thing to ask our listeners. Listeners, we love doing this podcast for you. We clearly, this is not our full-time gig, though it takes up a lot of time.
it does.
We're trying to think of ways to monetize this so we can make this more full-time, build things out. So if you have ideas, please let us
Yeah.
know.
We
We
need
would
some experts
love
on here.
to
Yeah.
figure out how to monetize this. And we'd love your support. If anyone knows anything or has any connections, let us know.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you so much for joining us on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparked something in you, whether it's a reflection, a new question, or a deeper commitment to showing up with empathy and accountability. If you found this episode meaningful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can also connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Substack, or whitewomenwakeup.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, be open, and let's keep on waking up.
Before we go, a quick playback on where today's research came from. The Caste framework we use throughout this episode is from Isabel Wilkerson's Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent. She is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and the first African American woman to win that award. The racial contractor data comes from a UC Santa Cruz study of Santa Clara County reported by KQED. The Shadow Workforce Report was published by Tech Equity Collaborative and Project include the stat that 51% of contractors workers receive zero job benefits comes from an NPR Marist poll. All sources are in the show notes. Thanks for listening and keep waking up.
Bye.
Bye.